Christian parenting.
Welcome back to the Journey Podcast. I am your host, Jonathan Pitts, and it's just a real joy to be with you again today. I'm really excited about the couple that I get to interview today and the story that I get to share. It's Jeremy and Adrienne Camp. You'll know Jeremy as well-known singer-songwriter, and his wife is also an amazing singer. You'll know their story. You'll likely know their story, I Still Believe, a story that was turned into a film by the same name, I Still Believe, earlier in 2020. Man, I first met Adrienne about 3 weeks before Wynter passed away, and they were actually excited to be friends, and Wynter and I would move to Nashville, and Adrienne would never see Wynter again after meeting her that first time. And then I would meet Jeremy a few weeks after Wynter passed away, and there's no doubt in my mind that God brought our families together for a specific time and for a specific purpose. And so I'm just excited to share our conversation. We talk about everything from parenting in this COVID season to their film, to our friendship, and to all the different ways that God has been working in my story and theirs. And so I hope you enjoy our time. And as you listen, I hope that you maybe just look for maybe ways that God is working in our lives that might be similar to yours, and in that find some hope. So anyway, I hope you enjoy our conversation. Let's join it now. Jeremy and Adie Camp, welcome to the podcast. How you guys doing today?
Doing awesome.
So happy to be with you.
Mr.
It's so it's so good to have you guys on. I haven't seen your faces in a whole, 14 days now.
Exactly.
Yeah, actually, I got to go to the desert, Palm Desert, where Jeremy and Adie currently reside, and just spend time with them there with my family for a week. We've had just a lot of run-ins lately, which is awesome. But I'm really glad to have you guys on the podcast and grateful to be friends with you guys. Just, I think about our journey together, which isn't a ton of time, but it's almost like not a ton of time, but a ton of time in the kingdom, I feel like, in terms of what God has done. I mean, I think back, Adie, Wynter and I met you probably, I guess, 3 weeks max before she passed away. We were in Dallas. I think it was right before we moved to Nashville. It was Anthony Evans' 40th birthday party, which Jeremy was supposed to be at, but he, I don't know why he wasn't there for his friend's party. We'll skip that.
At a concert, I think.
At a concert. I'm just playing. But anyway, Wynter and I met you there. And I remember you telling me, just talk a little bit about just meeting Wynter and what that was like, and what do you remember about her? I love hearing it myself. So selfishly, I kind of want to hear you say it.
It was amazing. I feel like we clicked instantly. And I don't know if that's because, I think we have such a deep relationship with Priscilla and Anthony. So it feels like anyone that's close to them, you just sort of had this instant, But Wynter and I were just chatting, and I was like, call me, here's my number. When you moved to Tennessee, and I was telling her we were talking about gymnastics and the school that your girls go to, and we were chatting about the community and all of that stuff. And we just were super excited to hang out, and I just felt like we immediately had like similar interests, and we were just excited to hang out and, exchange numbers. And I didn't know a ton of people that night, actually. So I kind of felt myself gravitating to Wynter.
Right.
She was just easy to talk to and just kind of calming. And
Wynter was a safe place to land. She still is, just in eternity now, but definitely a safe place to land, super relaxed and all that. It's actually really beautiful because after we moved to Tennessee, a couple weeks later, and probably a couple months after that, I don't remember exactly how it happened because I was so deep in grief then, but God would bring so many women around me that would help me with her magazine, because the magazine just dropped in my lap. My only thought was, I cannot fail my wife. I didn't vocalize that till 6 months later, and I had to kind of repent of that thought. But that was my motivation, was like, I cannot let her legacy die. I can't let her magazine die. And God would just send all these amazing women around me to help me with that. And somehow, some way, we wrangled into you just writing with us and doing it. It was called Around the World, a section of the magazine for a while. Now it's called Camp Time, I think. But just really grateful for how even like just you have lent your voice to help continue Wynter's legacy and just be a part of like inspiring little girls, regular little girls, to do big things for God, which is what the magazine's all about. But it's been fun having you do that. Jeremy and I had known of each other, and I had known of you guys for many, many years I was managing Anthony for many years, and Jeremy and Anthony, and I guess Adie as well, were all friends. And I was the manager in Dallas who knew of Jeremy and Adie in Nashville because they were helping just be like a family for Anthony in Nashville and good friends.
Yeah, we'd have sleepover.
I remember the first sleepover, he was like, I just slept over at Jeremy Camp's house. You'll love Jeremy. Such a great guy. You guys are so much alike. That was kind of one of the first things he ever said to me. And I honestly wouldn't meet you for probably, I ran into you at the San Diego airport a couple years after that. We just said hi. And then I wouldn't meet you again in person until moving to Nashville.
Yeah.
And after Wynter passed away, we moved to Nashville a couple weeks later. We'd already moved in to Nashville, but we came back from Dallas because she passed away in Dallas. And you and I found ourselves, I don't even remember how, other than maybe you just reached out to me,
Yeah.
but found ourselves on the golf course. And for 4 hours and 18 holes, I was able just to kind of pour out my grief
Yeah.
to a guy that could understand based on your life, which we'll talk about. But I'll never forget that time because it was probably the first time I felt semi-normal in my new normal, which is as this widower, which is still hard for me to say, you know. But I just remember that time. You remember that time? I don't know if I beat you or not. Did you beat me or did I beat you, or we weren't keeping score? I can't remember.
I think it was close. Like our last time we played, where I think you won by one. I think it's one by one.
Right. I mean, do you remember that time? Like, do you remember what I was like? I'm just curious. Like, did you feel like you were ministering to me, or how did that feel to you? Because I know what it felt like for me. It was just, I was thankful to have a guy in my life that kind of could understand. I mean, obviously everybody's story is different, but you lost your first wife many years before I lost Wynter. But like, just talk to me about that time. I don't even know, maybe you've had other opportunities like that, but I'm just curious.
No, honestly, I mean, yeah, I've had times where I'd be able to kind of sit down and talk to people, but not really like people that I feel like I have known, once again, barely knew you, but felt like I've known. And then people that I think have a kindred just understanding of who God is. And there's a scripture I love in 2 Corinthians that says that we're called to comfort others with what we've been comforted. And so, I felt like that for me, there's an opportunity for me just to be a listening ear. And I didn't feel like that I even had to try it. I remember telling you one time too, like, listen, I want to let you know that I'm never going to tell you that I totally understand, because it's completely different. Even though we both went through the loss of our wives, we all experience pain differently. It's just different. And so I told you, hey, just so you know, I'm never going to go like, I understand, I think,
exactly where
I know exactly where you're coming from. And I think that was, for one, you have children and that's a whole different dynamic, but there definitely was an understanding that you have that a lot of people can't understand, And so for me, I did feel like that we were able to have conversations. And I remember you were in a definite state of shock in a sense, but but a very, I was surprised at your maturity, I think, in it, but you were super honest, but you also just were processing things in a real mature way, which I was, super blessed by. So really, in a sense, you blessed me as well, in our conversation. But I do feel like I was able to share some things with you, to almost, in a sense, allow you to grieve and allow you to be honest and allow you to, you know what I mean? And I thought that we, in a sense, bonded super quickly. Like, I remember, it was like, we got done being like, you got mad at me. You're like, oh, great, I moved here. And then you leave.
Then you move away. Exactly. Yeah. You guys moved away like a month after, maybe a couple months after we moved here, not long after.
Yeah.
But
so
the thing I remember the most is, I guess, probably just this feeling of like, okay, if Jeremy Camp can get through this, Jonathan Pitts can get through this too. Like, you had been through it. And I think that point was probably, I don't know, 17 years for you or something like that. So 18. So I just remember thinking, okay, I'll get through this. And, I guess what I'd love to do is just back up. Probably most of the people listening to this podcast know your story at some level, but could you share kind of a 30,000 foot view of your story and how Adie kind of fits in that story? And Adie, you can jump in at any time. I'd love for you just to share your story.
I've actually, I'm from Indiana and I moved out to California, and in California, I met my first wife. Her name was Melissa. She was incredible. She loved Jesus, and that was what attracted me to her, was just her passion for the Lord. But before we even got married, we knew that she had cancer. And so really stepping into marriage, there was this kind of unknown of what was going to happen. And so I went into it knowing that something could happen, like this may be short lived. But I always had faith though. I always was like, no, but I think, no matter what, she's going to be healed. I kept those are my prayers. And, I didn't really go there, knew that could be a possibility, but never went there. I just was like, I'm going to push through this and trust the Lord. And so we, had a beautiful engagement, had a beautiful time of just, watching God work in so many miraculous ways. And I remember just having just that thought of, this is going to be the person I'm going to be with for the rest of my life, And at one point she got healed from her cancer, which was like, oh, completely is going to be, fine for the rest of our life, going to be married. And so it got to the point where we got married, and 2 weeks into our marriage, we had this, kind of crazy moment where she started feeling like her stomach, something was wrong with her stomach. so we were I was nervous. I wrote a song called Walk by Faith, and we got home from our honeymoon. And, literally we walked into the doctor's office. They did some tests on her and they said, hey, the cancer's returned and it is spread all over. She has weeks to months to live. And so, fast forward a bit, 3.5 months into our marriage, she went to be with the Lord. And so, talk about a crash course as you're a 22-year-old, kid that just had turned 23, going through one of the most difficult things you can experience. And so God had to take me to the deep places right away. It was like, it was from, kind of waiting out in the meadows, of my walk with the Lord to having to go straight to the cross and get on my face. You know what I mean? And that's what it was. There was a deepening that happened so quickly. And I didn't, I went through my grief. I went through times of being angry, the whole process, times of questioning. But, God really, through me going on tour, I met this beautiful woman right here. And
Adrienne Camp.
Adrienne,
that's your full name, Adrienne.
Adrienne for the Benjamin Gate. I remember she was this rocker chick. Remember her hair? Her hair had like spiky hair and everything. And so I see this girl and we just became friends. And she really was, in a sense, a healing factor for me, because she would ask me questions about Melissa. And pretty soon I got to the point where I was like, I like her. Like I was missing her when I didn't see her. And that's kind of how we knew that something was different. Like I wasn't looking for anybody. And actually, even at one point, we started kind of hanging out. And then I told her, hey, I can't hang out anymore. This is not right. I was married, it'd been over 1.5 years, but I was like, I don't know if I can do this. And God just spoke to me. And I really, as I sat there in front of her at a restaurant, I was getting ready to break up with her. And God literally just said, or I couldn't say anything. And so I looked at her and said, hey, do you feel like you can marry me? So just random, like,
wow.
Here I am trying to break up. And what came out of my mouth was, do you feel like you can marry me? That's kind of the story.
Awesome.
Yeah. And so
that's awesome.
It's my, if you know me, as you're starting to know.
Go hard or go home. Man.
Yeah.
Go hard or go home.
As you know me, that's me,
Are you in or are you out?
Yeah. Like,
right.
Circle yes or
that's
no, because I'm going for it. Let's do this.
Well, you just mentioned you had to basically lean into your faith and God just kind of grew you in that. And I just think about, you had mentioned playing golf with me and thinking about the perspective I had, the mature perspective I had. And the thing I knew right away, my faith had never been tested like that before. I've believed all my life. Like I never remember a day where I didn't know Jesus growing up. And I remember a lot of days where I didn't necessarily follow him well, but I definitely don't remember a day where I didn't know him. Right. And just based on how my parents raised me and just accepting Christ early. But that was a moment where I'm like, okay, is this real or is this not? And what I found, and it's really beautiful, is everything I believed just welled up to the surface, which is why, it's why I was able to just, I remember even when Wynter, I'm at her deathbed and I'm saying, I hate that term, by the way. I don't know why I said that. I'm there with her as she's dying and they tell me to come in and say goodbye. And I just start singing in her ear. It's your breath in our lungs. So we pour out a praise, pour out a praise. Like I'd start singing that in her ear and I'm telling myself that I'm going to be okay. It's God's breath. He gave her, he took it away. She's going to eternity. And I'm reminding her of where she's going. And I don't know how I had that. I just knew I had it in the moment. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is, and I didn't think that in that very moment, but I just, in those moments to follow, I was like, okay, I do believe this. And it's actually really beautiful because I'll fast forward. So we played golf together just a few weeks after Wynter passed away. I would probably, see you guys once or twice after that since you moved away. And we text and talk a little bit. But in March of 2020, this year, your movie, I Still Believe, was the premiere came out that night. I don't think it was out quite yet. And I remember getting invited to the premiere by some publicist, I think in Franklin. And I remember thinking that morning, I'm so busy, I want to go see this. I don't know if I have time. And I had a daughter I had to take on a date, Cameron, one of my 4. And so I just said, hey, Cameron, let's go. I didn't feel like I had the time. But that morning, I went into my office, I'm praying, and I'm sometimes I'll whiteboard. I'll just pray and I'll whiteboard just the thoughts God's given me. And I'm just writing down different things. And I find myself in tears. And the thing that I wrote down was, and I had no idea. I knew the title of your movie, I Still Believe, but I wasn't thinking about the movie, your story, any of that morning. And I just write down, I have the gift of faith. And it was just like this moment where God clarified for me who he's made me to be. There are so many moments in my life where I felt like I'm not spiritual enough because I don't do this or I don't do that or I don't. And I just remember in that moment writing down, I have the gift of faith. That's what God's doing with my story. He's kind of expressing faith through me. Hebrews 11:1. Faith is a substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. And I think about my story and what God's done. It's like believing even though I don't see. And so what was beautiful was that night going to the premiere with Cameron. I'll never forget walking in, and not having any idea that you guys were in Franklin, Tennessee, and walking into Adie in the lobby, and her saying you were there, and it was a ton of people there. I thought I wasn't going to see you, and I was like, I'm okay with that. Like, I've been to those kind of events before. You're like, okay, I'll just show up. And then I go to the bathroom. I'm like literally standing at the urinal.
I remember.
And who walks up beside me? The Jeremy Camp. And we're just talking I'll spare them the details, but we're just talking in the bathroom. And what was really beautiful about that moment for me is I think that theater closed like that next week or maybe a couple days later because of COVID. So I was able to see the movie, and I'm watching the movie through tears as I'm watching your story. I knew your story a little bit, but I didn't know it intimately. So I'm watching the story through tears the whole time. And God is confirming for me the very thing I wrote down on the board. I have the gift of faith, which I would say at some level, I don't know if you've ever expressed that, but your story to me is the story of like the gift of faith. Like, I still believe in spite of all that's happening. So I don't know. You guys I think Adrienne, you said you were watching me as I was watching the movie. It was just kind of a crazy moment that I'm really thankful for.
Well,
it's pivotal for me.
Asking you too, I said, I think we're in the bathroom. We were saying, hey, are you going to be okay with this? And I remember you.
Right. And I remember like being like, yeah. No big deal.
Then I saw you afterwards and you were like, bro, like, I gave you a big old hug and we were just crying.
Yeah. I mean, the movie ended and you guys were sitting, I was on the left-hand side in the stadium theater, and you guys were kind of in the center, but closer to the left. And I just got up and made a beeline to you, just knowing a million people were going to try to come and find you. And I just gave you a big hug. And it was just like, I couldn't stop crying. Like, I was shaking crying, which isn't normal for me.
Yeah.
And it was like God used that moment in a big way in my life. I'm really grateful for it. Just really, really grateful for it. But,
well, I think too, like, I feel like it's from that point too, God just puts people in people's lives, at the right timing. And, it's funny because we connected so quickly at first, and it was kind of like, oh man, and we see each other or text every once in a while, but it was like, it just wasn't what I thought, and I was like, that's fine, because God just puts people in people's lives at the right timing. Well, and then once that happened, something connected with us, I think, so much more. Yeah. And at that point now, it's just been an ongoing, just, even recently what God's been doing in a relationship, and just, being able to talk through a lot of hard things, things that are coming up now that are different, from a few years ago, and us being able to kind of just be there and talk through. Yeah. And we love it.
Well, that's the thing. Like, I thought, like, in my mind, I've never walked through this before. So in my mind, it's like, okay, you grieve and then you get through this thing and then you move on. And then you realize every other aspect of your life is influenced by the fact that you've gone through this loss.
That's right.
And so now, like, not only is there differences, like my 4 motherless girls and, this now widower guy, but there's like expectations that others have of you, which I've talked to Adrienne. I'd love you to talk about this a little bit, because you come at it from the other side of it. You married a widower in Jeremy, and I guess you realized pretty early on, there's just kind of like expectations that people have, and people are like, look, I'm just curious, like, just talk to me a little bit about that experience for you. And I don't know what God was teaching you through all that.
Yeah, there's so many different things to sort of walk through. I don't know why some of these memories are coming to mind, but I remember even at one point, Jeremy was moving and helping him like pack up some of his stuff, and just finding, Melissa's things, and just knowing like, what do I do with these things, but really knowing I never wanted to come in and say, okay, it's my turn now. Everybody else step aside. Like, I'm replacing her. It's, she's in heaven. I'm the one that Jeremy's chosen. And so here we are together. I think I just recognized so much the power of Jeremy's testimony, of his story, which really is in each and every one of our lives. It's like those things that God does in us, that is the very power of when he is made real to us, And so we can't disregard those moments, but really that is the thing, like Jeremy even shared earlier on, like that's the thing that we comfort others. That's the power of our story, And so I think I just recognized that very early on. I felt responsible almost to be a steward of it. And then I think on a personal level was just coming alongside people who were grieving, and just always asking myself, like, how would I feel if that was me? And instead of being insecure and sort of making it about me, of just really going like, I just need to stop and think, like, if I was Jeremy right now, how would I be feeling? And so there were even times, meeting Jeremy's family. And to be honest with you, they weren't really excited about us in the beginning. It wasn't like, oh yeah, you've brought somebody home. That's amazing. And they grieve.
Yeah.
And so I had to battle feelings of like feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm an imposter. Here I am infringing on this like deeply personal, vulnerable, sort of like a sacred space, I think, in but at the same time, it was what God had brought along. And I knew that God was doing something with Jeremy and I. It was undeniable just what God was doing between us. And so it was just one of those things that I just constantly had to go and just seek him. Like, God, how do I steward just everybody else's heart, I think, in this, you know, and just, again, like, put myself in their shoes, just go, hey, if I was Jeremy's mom right now, you know, Melissa was like the quintessential, in a sense, perfect pastor's wife. And here I came along like the total rocket chick that was edgy and, you know, it's just like, I'm sure that that's probably not what they had in mind for Jeremy's chapter 2, you know?
Well, it's just like, I mean, what you're speaking to is just, I always say that grief is just dealing with expectations that are lost. Like, it doesn't matter whether it's death or whether it's something else. Like, you expected one thing and something else happened. And so people find themselves reeling from, like, I expected 40 more years with Wynter. You know, I got 15, I expected 40 more, and I got 15. And so there's this, and that's the same. It's not just true of the person that experiences the loss, but it's those that are around them that also experience a level of loss, you know?
Absolutely.
I didn't get that. I get it now. And I talking with you, I get it more because you're so many more years down the road of just both you guys experiencing that. And that's honestly for me, the hardest thing now is realizing, oh, it's not over. Like, it's always going to be a part of my story. It's always going to be a part of my ministry, I guess, in a way. So,
you know, even when we were filming the movie, you know, it's this February coming up next year will be 20 years since Melissa's been in heaven. And, you know, a couple of years ago, we're in the filming of the movie, and it literally hit Jeremy. I mean, you can explain a little bit more if you want to, but it was like it literally just took him back to that very, very, very moment.
I felt like I was actually there. And I remember the emotions I felt were almost the same emotions that I remembered, because your mind is very powerful, you know, and so your emotions and your grief, it sticks there. And so, you know, one of the things that I share, and I've shared this a lot just in understanding grief, is that, you know, God has really healed that open wound that I had. It's not an open wound anymore. So it's not like, you know, you move wrong or whatever, all of a sudden you're like, oh, it's just there all the time. That God does heal that, but there's always a scar that remains that sometimes you'll look at and you'll be reminded of the pain. And I think that's the difference. He heals those wounds, but you always have a scar. And it's a reminder. It's like Jesus and his scars. It's a reminder of what he's done for us. You know what I mean? And I think that it's the understanding, though, of God's faithfulness in the midst of it is what's beautiful about it, you know?
Yeah. It's funny because I'm doing a podcast with the guy that I would call my pastor, a guy named Scott Wilson. He was asking me for Wynter's funeral because he wanted to watch it back. He co-officiated with Dr. Tony Evans, and I just pulled it up and I just started watching it. And it was like, man, it was so real to me again. It was beautiful, though, because even when it's real, I feel the pain. I know the pain, but I also know the pain is there because of the joy I had with Wynter. So it also brings back like really like special moments, special feelings. Like, I'm looking at pictures at the beginning of the funeral as it's scrolling just through pictures, and it reminds me even of the emotions I had when that picture was taken. Yeah. And some of them weren't, like, I remember one of them was like, oh, we had a fight right before that picture. You know, it's not like always perfect stuff, but it's really human stuff. And it was stuff we healed from, and it was really beautiful. So it's really good. I mean, you guys have now been married how many years?
Almost 17 years.
Yeah.
Almost 17 years. You have 2 daughters and a son, unbelievably beautiful kids. We just vacationed with you guys, which was awesome, and spent some time together. What's beautiful is how God keeps weaving our stories together. Your youngest daughter, Ari, just wrote a song called What We Need.
Yeah.
And Alina, my oldest daughter, featured on that song. And that just happened, which was really beautiful. You guys can check that out. What We Need. Just go to YouTube, find it. Awesome song. They have super talented kids, and just fun to work together in that way. But it's just really beautiful how God just keeps weaving story together, relationships together. You know, just spending time with you guys lately, just a couple of parenting questions. Spending time with you guys lately, I just know that, Jeremy, your career, it's just grown constantly over all these years, but like COVID has changed everybody's life. And I know it's changed yours as well. Just take a second. I'm just curious to see how it's changed your life, what that's felt like, what God's done. And for you too, Adie, obviously it's changed both of your lives. Like, what has that done to you guys? And just pros, cons, just speak to a little bit about that.
You know, so when this whole thing happened, it was like everything got shut down for me. You know, I've toured for almost 20 years. And so our tour got canceled. Of course, movie got canceled. And then, you know, all of a sudden here I am just at home, and like where I should have been in New York doing interviews because of the movie and all that. And then on tour, I was just sitting at home. And so it was a massive shift. It's like running 100 miles per hour and then hitting a brick wall and it's being like, I don't know what to do now. Yeah. And so there's a feeling of like angst of, I need to pivot. I need to figure this out. And then you got to the point where God was like, you're not going to figure this out, and I had to really come to that conclusion because I was very angsty for a while, trying to just do all the right things and make sure, even taking advantage in a good way of going, okay, how can we minister to people during this time? And that's not a bad thing, but it always was like, I really just didn't know what to do. And so finally I've come to the point now where I've been seeing how God has used this so huge in our kids' lives, where in my life too, of course, because it's taught me a lot about how I can't rely on the things of the world. Some men trust in horses and some in chariots, but I trust in the name of the living God. So it's like, I can't trust in those things. I got to trust in him. And so it really has, made priorities and things shift. And so we've had great Bible studies with our kids, conversations that I know that we wouldn't have had if we weren't with each other the whole time, constantly. Things that my daughter will be out of the house in probably a couple of years. And so you start going, I'll never get this time ever with my family again like this, ever. And so I think I just kind of look at it as that, I'm going to not, wish this away. I'm going to sit in it, stay in the moment of where I'm at right now and just be with my kids, pour into them. And it's been beautiful. I mean, like I said, we've had the best conversations, Bible studies, times of worship, and it's been incredible. I mean, it's not always been like, this is easy. Yay.
Your life has not been like that with kids. My house is so easy with my 4 girls.
So don't get me wrong. Normal family of I'm just saying, but there's dynamics like that have happened that have been amazing. And so
how's it changed your marriage? Has it changed your marriage?
I don't know if it's changed our marriage, but I think, this is the most amount of time we've actually ever had with each other.
Oh yeah.
And as for most people, Jeremy's in a sense, we're now stuck at home together every day, all day long. But I think one thing that was really cool is in the very beginning of quarantine, we had just released a book that we'd written together called In Unison. And essentially it's about marriage and just our story together. And we probably did 100 interviews, maybe, I think, in the podcast and all
had to do
all
with
that kind of
the
stuff.
movie and the book and all that. Yeah.
But I think what was really cool was there was this almost accountability, I think, in the beginning of going, okay, you've said all these things. You've said you're going to trust the Lord when you don't understand what's going on. You're speaking all these things about what God has done in your marriage. Now, are you really going to live it? Because now as a family, it's like we're stuck together. We're in quarantine together and this conflict and, how are we going to live this out? And so it was almost like I felt like God provided this framework for us of just going, okay, I've already put these things in your heart. I've, given you the wisdom for how to do this. Now live it out. And so I think that was something that, even with our kids, it was like just pulling them in and having these intentional conversations and just saying, hey, this is how we're going to handle this. It doesn't mean it's easy. But one of the things is we just sat down, like Jeremy said, we actually started in the book of James of just going, consider it pure joy when we face trials of many kinds, and just going, as believers, this is where we need to land. Doesn't mean it's easy. Doesn't mean you're not going to face difficult things, but we're going to look at the value of what we can learn over the ease of our circumstances,
I've heard a pastor say that biblical times, the Israelites, when they go into a desert season, instead of asking Americans and Westerners, why God, why, they ask, what are you trying to teach me? What do I need to learn? What is this about? Yeah. Which I think is really beautiful, which is hard for us to do. And we can't do unless we consider it pure joy, which means having to find joy in those circumstances.
Exactly. So, totally.
Yeah. And you guys also did, I think this happened in the COVID season, but just some worship music together. I've never heard you sing, Adie, because I wasn't around for the Benjamin Gates stuff, but how did that come about? Was that just in COVID, just time, or was that before COVID planned? I'm just curious.
No, Jeremy had always joked, we should do something together. But honestly, we just didn't actually have the time, between touring. And then I think for us as well, when Jeremy is home, we really try to be more intentional. It's sort of like having that quality time together because he isn't around all the time. But it just sort of came as a natural byproduct from some of our time in quarantine.
It's beautiful. And y'all's voices sound amazing together. If you guys can say the name of the project or where people can find it, I'd love that too. So
it's Jeremy and Adrienne Camp, the worship project.
Yeah.
Right?
That's I was like, I think.
Clear, not clever. Clear.
Yeah, it really was a thing. I woke up one morning, it was 3 days after everything got shut down. And I was, of course, just down. And so I woke up and went upstairs because I felt like a tug of my heart to pick my guitar up. And so I've had that feeling before. So I'm like, okay. So I'm kind of strumming around and I wrote a song called Whatever May Come. And we just kind of played it and posted it on socials, and God used it, massively. And I wasn't even trying to hey, check this song out. It's more like, I don't know what to say, everybody, so here's a song to like describe how I feel, you know? And from that really kind of birthed this desire, because we realized how God was using that song. And so he started giving me songs. I wasn't trying to write songs. He started giving me songs, and we just realized we should do a album together. And so we did this EP during COVID that wasn't planned. And it's been really special. I think because of that, and because of the book and all this stuff being shut down, we have had to really, in a sense, we've been sharing this a lot. One of the things that we've learned is that God has kind of cleaned our slate, and we're saying, okay, Lord, what do you want to put back on it? I think that's a big thing. Sharing that a lot, but I think that's what it is. It's going, okay, you've cleaned our plate now. So it's like, what do you want to do? And so we're kind of waiting right now. I mean, we know that I'll still play, and we have things, of course, that we're going to do, but we definitely feel a shift in some way. Don't know what that means. I think more stuff together for sure, but I don't really know what it actually looks like. But it's exciting because I feel like we get almost like a restart, you know, and I think it's good. I think for everybody, they need to kind of have that mindset. I'm not saying it's easy, but that mindset of like, okay, God, once again, what are you showing us? And when he's leading you and directing you, there's going to be a lot more impact in what you do and not more peace.
Really beautiful. You guys are an amazing inspiration to me. One, because of your story, but two, because with all the success you've had, worldly and kingdom, like you just are regular people that love Jesus deeply.
Nice, man.
It's massively impacted my life. And I just want to say thank you just for your friendship, and just really grateful to just be walking out this journey with you guys. Just thanks for being on the podcast. And hey, how can we find you? I mean, probably just Google Jeremy and Adie Camp and everything pops up. But what's the best way to get a hold of you guys or find you guys?
Instagram, Adie Camp, and then Jeremy Camp Official. Facebook, I think it's the same. Actually, it might be Adrienne Camp on Facebook. But,
and then jeremycamp.com, and the books on Amazon or any store near you. And anyway, but we thank you, man. I appreciate you, and really, it's been really sweet to see what God's doing with you, and I'm excited to see what he has in store for you, man. We love you, buddy.
Love you too, guys. Thank you, guys. God bless you. Well, I hope you enjoyed my time with Jeremy and Adrienne as much as I did. I was like a giddy kid, just remembering that all that God has done, and it's just fun. Anytime I get to talk with them or spend time with them, it's a real joy for me, and so I hope it was for you as well today. And I hope that if you enjoy the podcast, that you would maybe leave us a review, maybe leave us a comment. The only way we can continue to grow is also if you share. So would you just consider sharing the podcast and liking it, reviewing it, and doing all you can to help us share the message that we're sharing. And I just say thank you for all that you're doing to help me out with that. God bless you, and we'll see you next time.